Well, we're standing here in front of the home of George K Bingham, the Missouri artist, famous for painting scenes along the Missouri River here and famous throughout the world today. The home here was built by him in 1837. The Bingham family came from Virginia in the year 1819 and settled in Old Franklin downriver about 12 miles. Old Franklin was the largest town out here. There were 7 children eventually, 6 children, 7 slaves, and Mr. and Miss Bingham and Mrs. Bingham's father who came out here. They had another daughter after arriving in Franklin. The father ran a tavern and then called Square and Compass. A lot of tragedies followed that Bingham family, as do a lot of people at that time period. George Caleb Bingham, the artist, had lost his father to malaria, lost his several of his younger sisters, his younger brother to the river, drowning, and his grandfather drowned in the Missouri River as well. So there was a lot of history, a lot of trouble, and then by 1827, she decided to move her family to about a 160-acre farm down outside of Arrow Rock here, where her father had been growing tobacco. So she sent George Caleb Bingham, the young artist, to be in here to be apprenticed to a cabinet maker at the age of 16. By 17, he was in Boonville, apprenticed to another cabinet maker. And from there, he met Sarah Elizabeth Hutchinson, his first wife, and moved over here and built the house in 1837. So why don't we go inside? Yeah. All right. Well, we're now inside of George Caleb Bingham's home. It is a good example of a home of that time period, built in the federal style. These Bingham slaves had made the bricks right on the property here, farming them right on the lawn out here. Bingham was a good artist at the time, being mostly self-taught, having some teaching from Mattie Wood, who was one of his mother, art teacher at her school. His mother had opened a school after losing her husband over in Franklin, then 1 year again in Arrow Rock. So he did have a little benefit of art from her, the basics. And then while he was at his father's tavern over in Franklin, he watched the portrait of Daniel Boone being painted by Chester Harding, who was a tenor portrait painter around the area here, which gave him this impression that he truly wanted to be an artist in the worst way. And so I think in many ways he willed himself to be an artist. He studied by just studying paintings, going up to St. Louis and studying the art galleries up there, seeing how the old masters were done. So he taught himself a great deal of his painting skills. Then later in Pennsylvania, a little later on in life, he did get a small college that he found there that gave some art lessons and came out an entirely different artist from the time period. As you see, the house has some examples of his works. I do realize there's a lot of reflections in here from all the windows, so you have to look past that. But it's primitive in many ways because that's what was out here. Everything had to be handmade out here. You couldn't get furniture from the east very easily, so the cabinet makers here did it. And as far as we can tell, a lot of the woodwork in the home, the fireplace in the other room in there, all were by Bingham's hand. The 9/6 windows, the fireplace, and the crown molding and that type of thing probably came from Bingham's own hand, as all he was a cabinet maker and had been apprenticed for a number of years for cabinet makers. So he certainly had the skill. And the slaves would have done the other parts of the building that would have been under his control. Shall we move on through the house? In the other room, which is being used as a bedroom at this time, as you can see in here, it's still very primitive. You know, I talked about the mantel. We do believe that he did have a hand in making this himself. Of course, there was a lot of reconstruction done to the home at the time the state of Missouri acquired it. So this is obviously new brick, but most of the things in the home are of his time period. They do not belong to him, unfortunately, because he did not leave all of his things behind for us to look at. But we do have articles in here that the state of Missouri has put in here to show what a home like this was like in that time period. Some people call this a rope bed. However, if you look at it, it's actually a peg bed. The pegs hold the rope in place. A true rope bed has holes in the side and go through. But you had to tighten these at night when you went to bed because the ropes would stretch. Probably made of hemp, most of these ropes would have been at that time period. But they would stretch, so the little poem, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite, comes from this bed. Because at night you would tell your children, now sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite, which was always a problem in that time period. So as we look through here, you get a good view of the 9/6 windows, which we also believe that Bingham made. This was just a typical room that you would have seen during that time period. Okay, now we're in what is called a summer kitchen. These are kind of interesting in the fact that people of the day believed that this was the best way to prevent fires. This is called a dog trot style house, and these dog trots always had a summer kitchen connected by a porch to the main house. The thought being that they could put a fire out before it got into the house. They were very primitive in nature, just simply because of the time period they lived. In most cases, slaves would have had to do the work in these kitchens. However, we don't have any record showing that Bingham used slaves in this particular house, even though he did own slaves at part of his life. But you can see some interesting things just sitting here. This is, people find this interesting, and I think it's kind of interesting too. I usually let people kind of guess, but since I don't have anyone to guess right at this moment, I'll tell you this is a lamp. And a lamp was used by putting fat. It's a grease lamp. And just a little wick on each end, and it would create a kind of a candle-like flame. Spices were expensive. This is a lunch pail for a child. This is a lunch pail for an adult. So you see they didn't have much money, so they probably put a biscuit in here or something of that nature with a little homemade jelly or something like that. And then you've got your pie safe over here. These were used all the time through several hundred years out here as a way of protecting the pies, cakes, and pastries, bread, and that type of thing from insects. That's why the little holes are in there. Okay, now I just like to go through this little book that we keep up here, just to kind of give you a visual part of this talk. This is George K Bingham, for those who do not know who he is. This is him as a younger man, painted by the use of a mirror. These are photographs of his paintings. Bingham wore a wig, which is very interesting, having lost his hair at age 19 from a terrible fever, possibly due to measles or even a nice case of smallpox. This is his first wife, Sarah Elizabeth. This is the wife that came to this house. And this is her first son, Isaac Newton Bingham. Now, Isaac Newton Bingham was born in this house, and he was not to live very long, unfortunately. The family moving out to Washington, D.C. for a while so he could join the Art Guild. And while out there, Newton dies. And Newton is the namesake of his younger brother who had drowned in the river. This is another one of Sarah. She had fallen asleep reading a dime novel, they claim, while he was at either an art meeting or a business meeting, or maybe a political meeting of some sort. Bingham had 3 wives during the course of his lifetime. His first wife was Sarah Elizabeth Hutchinson. His second wife was Eliza Thomas from Columbia. Her mother and father helped to found William Jewell College, co-founders. And then Maddie Lycan, Dr. Lycan's wife in Kansas City, Missouri. Bingham's first paintings that hang down in the State Historic Site are these two here. This is Dr. Sappington and his wife. And Bingham painted these at age 19. So you can see he was really good even at that time period. But he did not do arms and he did not do full bodies at that time period. But Dr. Sappington and his wife are hanging down there, and along with a lot of Bingham's prints made from his engravings are hanging down at the State Historic Site as well. This is just a couple of things that I'll just kind of show you here. This one's canvassing for the boat, and some say the tavern here was the inspiration for the backdrop of it. And this is, of course, the card players. This is the county election. Some say that one of the courthouses here in town was also for the inspiration for this particular painting. Most of these are all Arrow Rock citizens. In fact, Bingham liked to paint Arrow Rock citizens all the time, people that he was familiar with. So we do know who a lot of those people were. So when you come to see us, why, you must go down there and see some of his engravings and some of his paintings.